the biggest myth is that every signing service is the same, and that's far from being the truth. And it's far from being the truth because in this business, we believe in establishing relationships with our clients that will build into a partnership, right? And there are some signing services that do not want to, do not know how to, or don't think that it's necessary to have that relationship with the client. And then also the individuals that are working for the signing service, which are the notaries or the attorneys.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Expert. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Phillip Hogan. And Phillip, we're going to be talking about a few different things. We're going to be talking a little bit about how to hire and interview staff and selecting the right employees, how to lead individuals after you hire them, and to also build a multi-talented team as a small business, and not always having the resources to hire everybody you need all at once, and then learning what's in your wheelhouse and what resources that you need for things that aren't in your wheelhouse, and maybe talk a little bit about expectations when you start a business as far as when you can start getting paid. So it should be a great conversation and a good discussion. With that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Phillip.
Devin, thank you so much for having me. We really appreciate it. And I am the president and founding president of Signing Services of America. We're a national notary signing service located in Atlanta, Georgia. We were established in 2016. And from that year, we have just grown by leaps and bounds.
Well, sounds like a great business, good place to be in. So with that, but just a bit of introduction, just as a reminder to the audience. So Phillip was on our sister podcast, The Inventive Journey. So if you want to go and catch his full episode and his full journey there, certainly feel free to check that out. But as we now dive into some of the topics at hand, I think, one of the areas that everybody hits into as a startup or a small business, especially when you get starting, is how to hire and interview people, doing the interviewing, hiring, bringing on the right employees. And that always seems to be, I think a large amount of people think, hey, I know people, I do an awesome job of hiring. And then you get into it and you actually have to start going through the hiring, and it's a different experience than maybe what you anticipated. So talk through a little bit kind of as you're looking to select the right employees and interview them and hire them. What are some tips or some areas that people should consider?
Sure. One of the things they should consider first off is really know what position you want to have filled, right? And while that may sound really kind of like basic, it's really profound, because you may have the position that you want in mind, but the position that's needed for the business doesn't so necessarily coordinate with what you have in mind. So you have to really know what it is that you want this person to do. Then, of course, you've got to develop a job description. So when you do your interview, you're prepared to literally find out if an individual is prepared to come into your company and do the work that you have designated for them to do. You also have to be willing to delegate. There are many people who are small business owners who are holding on to the desire and the need to do everything. And you just can't do everything when you're a small business, and you have to prioritize, okay, what's the position I need to hire the most? Why? And then begin the process. The next thing is understanding your but
before we go to the next thing, just to dive into that just a little bit. So so let's say, because I think that people inherently know that you probably, they only have so many hours in the day, they only have so many skill sets, and yet it's easy to, in theory, understand that. And yet then as you start up or a small business, you do also have the budgetary concerns. Can you bring everybody on at the same time? You have to be able to afford it. And while it'd be awesome to have unlimited budgets and just be able to, grow exponentially, very rarely are you in that case. And so how do you said, you kind of need to know what is the most important, or where to hire first. how do
Right.
you go about kind of figuring that out, or how do you make that determination?
Well, if you developed a business plan, your business plan would reveal the different components in your operations process that would require the number of employees, the type of employees, the skill sets you're looking for these employees, and what are these employees are able to come to the table with. So I think the business plan is the blueprint, if you will, for how to begin looking for someone to come into your company and literally do what you have designated for them to do.
Hmm.
And if you don't have a business plan, sometimes people start businesses without a business plan. Well, if you spend enough time within the business, then you should have a good idea as to what are some of the more what components are, have the most highest priority. Does the person who is the receptionist have the highest priority in your company, or does the person who's actually literally building the software for your company to sell to your clients the highest priority? So you have to determine what element within your company has the priority, list the priorities, and then that's how you begin looking for your employees. That's what we've done.
Hmm.
And we found that to be very, very successful. Another thing I realized is with Sign Service America, we have departments that require more attention than other departments. And in the operating department, for us, is where we have the most number of employees because those individuals are we consider to be like the engine that runs the shop,
Hmm.
right? We've got orders coming in, we've got notaries calling us, we've got clients calling us, and we have to have a very talented, robust scheduling department to accommodate the um, how would you say, the influx of various communications from those sources. We have to have the correct number of employees that can handle the amount of incoming calls and inquiries to get the job done.
Hmm. Now, let me ask maybe one follow-up question to that, which is, now what happens if you look at your plan, you say, hey, got 2 or 3 different positions, they're all important, they'll all be impactful, they're
Mm,
all part of the plan, but I
mm,
don't have the budget to do all of them. So in other words, how do
mm,
you, in theory, if you say, hey, look at the plan, here's what we need to be successful, and
right,
you have the budget to do so, and you execute on it, works out great.
right.
Earlier on, typically, you don't have that budget, and so how do you, if it seems like it's at sixes, or hey, need all of these things, but we don't have the budget to afford it. Any thoughts on how you start to prioritize even or beyond that?
Yeah, so I'll answer that question is by applying it to what we did with Signing Service America is again looking at the company, determining what are the departments of the company and what departments require the most attention. And that was how we slowly began to rise, if you will, the scheduling department from the lower level of that list to the top position in that list, because that's where our money comes in, right? That's where if we can't fill orders, then guess what? We're not going to be able to have any revenue. We're not going to be able to have the business. We're not going to be able to have clients. So in Sign Insurance America, our scheduling department is the primary department that keeps the company moving forward. And I would advise any small business to look at your company and say, well, where is the source of revenue coming from? And when it comes into our company, how do we receive it? Who is that point of contact? And that's really where you need to start putting your first hires.
Hmm. No, I think that makes perfect sense. And it's a matter of, I think you have to figure out the priorities of the business and which will be the most impactful. And you have to realize that you may not have the budget to do it all at once. And so then you have to go and start triaging that a little bit. Now, one of the other things that we'd talked about, and I think goes along with this, is I think as a startup or a small business owner, you almost inherently, whether you want to or not, have to be multi-talented, or in other words,
Yes.
you have to wear a lot of hats. Now, it's not to say that you're going to be equally talented in everything that you take on, but you still have to take on those and get those covered, especially as you're getting started, and until you can progress the business to move those over and to hire the right people and to take those, or to move those out. And so how do you cultivate, or how do you figure out which talents you can reasonably cover, and which ones are the ones that you should take on, and which ones are the ones that are just outside your resources, outside your wheelhouse, and really it's you need to figure out a way to bring someone on to handle those. I mean, because I think it's a fine balance between what you can handle or what you might not be perfect at but can do well enough, versus ones that are just outside of that. So any thoughts on that?
Sure, you have to know your strengths and weaknesses, right? And so, as a business owner, I'm sure for us, my strength was operations. My weakness was sales and marketing, right? And so, but sales and marketing is almost just as important as having someone in our scheduling department, because we need to constantly start working on cultivating our social media presence so we can begin to start the sales cycle and potentially identifying leads and bringing those leads to potentially become new business. So I would say sales and marketing is like one of the top three positions of any company, and possibly the owner could be the sales and marketing person. Since you know the business, since you know the business inside and out, it's assumed that you'll be able to sell that business. And selling is a skill, right? And so and if you don't know, if you're not comfortable selling, then you've got to find a way to become comfortable so that you will be able to stand before people and command their attention, because you want to offer them a service that can fulfill their needs.
No, that makes sense. And so, any thoughts on how you figure out where your strengths are? Is that, doing a self-assessment? Is that asking friends, or, looking at your experience or your background, or things that you enjoy and things that you thrive at, or kind of all the above, or kind of thoughts on how you go about, analyzing? Because I think sometimes people either get people that say, hey, I'm great at everything and I can handle it all, or you get people that that don't have as self-confidence, and they say, no, I don't feel comfortable taking that on, even when they would be well suited. So thoughts on kind of how you figure out what those strengths are that you should play to?
Sure, and it's a very good question. Thanks for asking. And I think that why we like to think that we are master of all of the requirements to make our business run. Quite frankly, we're not. Quite frankly, there's some areas that we're just not strong in compared to other areas where we're super strong. And I would like to take a moment to compare what we're talking about to a real story that I had with a software developer, and who we currently subscribe to. And what he's done, and he built a fantastic piece of software. I mean, it's a national product. Many people are using it, but he admitted to me that he is not a people person. He is not a type of individual that would can stand in front of someone personally and have a conversation. He would prefer to have someone come aboard to implement the sales and marketing component of his company, and he would work behind the scenes. And so when he realized that, his business began to grow, because he was fumbling and bumbling and making huge mistakes, to people on the sales and marketing side, because he was nervous, he didn't feel comfortable, but he built the software. So if we were to use his strategy, which is to make the self-assessment and be real, be honest with your feedback. And if you're strong at accounting, in addition to understanding your business, then for maybe initially you can be the bookkeeper or the accountant, right? If you're not strong with numbers, if you're not strong accounting, then you know what, you need to really bring somebody in, or start building a very simple type of accounting software system that can allow you to manage the revenue and the expenses of your business. So it all starts with this, really, Devin, understanding oneself, really, and really understanding not only, some people say, well, I'm the startup, I am the entrepreneur of this business, I'm the founder of this business, I need to know everything, I need to do everything. And that's just not the attitude to take to really be successful. And sometimes we have to lean on family. Sometimes we have to lean on family and friends and ask, hey, listen, can you come over and volunteer some time to help me with this particular project, or help me with this particular phase of my business? And maybe in time, as the revenue comes on, I can convert you to a paid employee with a salary that works for you and I.
So now almost going along those lines just a little bit, one of the things that we talked about, and I think it varies a little bit depending on, different businesses and how, what you're doing and how quickly you can go. But I think that there is most often a period of time, whether it's months or years, where you should probably anticipate not making much or not getting paid a lot. And it's building up that foundation of clients and figuring out where your niche in the market is, what your pricing should be, all of those things. And so, first of all, how do you get a business going with the expectation of that you're not going to get paid? In other words, is it just do it as a side hustle, start it out, while you have a income? Do you save up a lot of money? Do you figure out a way to get paid earlier? Kind of walk us through at least your thoughts on that.
All of the above is that you want to certainly, build yourself a little cash cow, because at some point you're going to realize, all right, you know what, I want to start a business, but I'm working for someone else. Well, then we have to get your orders, your ducks lined up in a row. And that is to, if you have a lot of bills, we need to get you to reduce those bills, eliminate those bills, and then convert the money that you're using for those bills to then going into your bank account to start your business. You may want to work a second job, and the second job could be the revenue from the second job could be the sole source of funding your business. So if you're bringing in $10,000 a month from the second job, or whatever you're bringing in, that money should not be spent. It should go into your bank account that's required to start your business. In regard to, and if you're single, then it's much easier to start a business than when you have a family, right? Because then you have to make decisions. When you start a family, when you have a family, you want to shift from being employed to now becoming self-employed. It's just not you that's depending upon that revenue. It's your family. And unless you're able to immediately replace your income from your employer with your startup business, it might not be a wise thing to do the way you want to do it. So those are some of the steps that I would advise taking. I was very fortunate that when I started my company, we had a major client that was giving us business as I was a self-proprietor. So as a sole proprietor. So when we started Signing Services America, we had revenue. And that was just very, very, we were blessed for that. And it's very rare, right? So I would advise that don't be in a hurry to jump off the cliff and start flying on your own, but set it up, right? And setting it up also means to anticipate who you'll be needing in your support team, right? For Signing Service America, when we first started, we were using, we didn't have an attorney that was on retainer. So when we needed legal services, we had to reach out to some of these online legal service products, and it worked. But then when we got to the point where we can afford to have a retainer attorney online, boom, we cut the check, and now we have an attorney who's available when we need them. And that's just the price of doing business in today's economy and today's world.
No, I think that definitely makes sense. Now, maybe one follow-up question to that. So, I think one of the difficulties when you're doing a business is you start out, you don't know how long it should be before you should start to make money, but at some point you need to make money. In other words, you can't be losing money for the whole extent of the business. Otherwise it's really becomes, a hobby, or becomes a, something you do out of enjoyment because you're not making money out of it. And if you want to be serious about a business, you have to set it up to at some point be profitable or make money or allow you to receive compensation. Now, it's hard to know, hey, am I close and I just need to stick it out a little bit longer and it will be profitable soon? Or, hey, I sunk in enough time, money, and effort, and it's just not going anywhere, and I need to pull the ripcord and go do something else. So any thoughts on kind of how you figure out and set expectations as to how long you might go at or a startup or a small business before you should start expecting to have that income or be able to make money off of it?
Sure. And that's a great question. Thanks for asking, Devin. And it all depends also who's depending upon you for your source of income. If you're single and you have a very modest lifestyle, that's one dilemma. But if you've got a family with young children and your salary is part of the salary to furnish your household, then that's an entirely different question. So it's a entirely different question and answer. So with us, I said 3 years. 3 years would be the cutoff point for me. But fortunately, my wife was able to cover the house, a great deal of the household expenses. So it took the financial pressure off of me and allowed me to focus on the business. Now, if you have a partner who's like that, then hey, bravo, right? So it really begins with, I don't want to oversimplify this by continually stating it, but a person has to make that self-assessment at what's in their life, who is in their life, what do they have in their life that can allow them to not only start the business, but how long do we roll with this business until we can start getting a paycheck? And sometimes people expect to receive a paycheck from a company that they start 6 months in. And realistically, that's not always the case. And so that's where your cash reserve will come in handy. Or maybe you can start a business while also working a full-time job. So you're not pressured to get the business to pay you a salary and then take care of your lifestyle. So it really comes down to making a self-assessment. It comes down to asking the questions and being honest with the answers that you come up with.
No, I think that's a great piece of advice and a great takeaway. So now, one of the other areas that we talked on a little bit, before the podcast, was to do your research a little bit before you start your business. So in other words, a lot of times people get excited about an idea. You just want to jump in, you want to get going, and you say, hey, this will be a great opportunity, and I'll figure out the money and I'll figure out the business plan and that later on. I'm just excited to get started and want to go do something. So how do what kind of research should you be doing, and kind of how do you make or ensure that you don't get so excited about the opportunity that you miss the red flags, or you can be or self-honest about whether or not it makes sense?
Great question, Devin. My first business was a nonprofit in Brooklyn, New York, and I purchased a three-family house out of my pocket and started a transitional living community for adult men who were formerly incarcerated. The name of the nonprofit is Housing Matters of New York, and I started it out of the ambition of wanting to make a difference in people's lives. And I was working so I could afford to work and also build up the business. Well, what I didn't realize is that I didn't go into with the business plan. I didn't had not conducted any type of research to find out who was providing this type of service in the community, what type of service, how long they. I didn't do any type of due diligence. I just jumped right into it. Well, lo and behold, I found out much later that there were a number of companies, there were a number of nonprofits that were doing this type of work within the community where I was. And it made it extremely competitive to get various type of things done, particularly for a nonprofit, right? In terms of funding, in terms of volunteer support, in terms of media attention, in terms as getting clients to come into the program. It was just a very arduous journey, and I stuck with it because I had a full-time job and I can come to that job in the evening. So in maybe 3 years, we finally got our funding. Well, today with Signing Service America is a very different course, right? I took my time to understand what is the type of company that I wanted to start, who is doing this work in the area. Thank goodness the internet has plethora of information. You just have to be willing to spend some time to do your research, know what you're researching for, and be honest and accept what comes up. Now, sometimes the business that you might want to start, there are a number of other companies that are doing the same type of service, so or the same offering the same type of product. Do you get bullheaded and say, well, okay, I'm going to do this better than them, and then start competing against somebody who's been in the business arena longer than you have? Or do you realize, well, you know what, gosh, this may not be the best business to take because there's so much competition, and how do I find myself being successful? So again, it's really knowing yourself. It's being able to ask yourself the hard questions and then listening for the truthful answers to come back. But it must start with research. It must start with, and it's various type of research, right? Everything is on YouTube nowadays, right? So it's not only the internet, but you can go on YouTube and plug in, okay, whatever the type of business you want to start, and just see what comes up. And that doesn't mean to not do it. It just means that if there is a number of established businesses, what is going to be different about your company that would inspire someone to want to buy your service or buy your product when there are other people who've been doing it longer and have an established track record of doing it?
No, I think that definitely makes sense. Good takeaway. And I think that one thing that you'd hit on a bit, and I think it's the hardest, is to probably be self-honest with where the business is at, and what or where the idea of the business could go, and what else is out there. And I think sometimes you say, well, but we're a little bit different. Well, you have to decide whether that little bit of difference is going to be enough in the marketplace, and whether or not you can differentiate yourself, and whether or not you have a good plan. And I think a lot of those things, if you try and just gloss over it, or try and convince yourself that it's not a big deal, then it can set you up for a much harder time with the business, versus if you can be self-honest and either say, yeah, that here's how I'm going to do it, here's a plan, here's a good idea, or hey, this is just not a good idea, it's not going to work, and I'd be time and money ahead to go spend my effort somewhere else. I think that doing that on the onset can set you up a lot better to success. So I think that's a great insight. Well, now, as we've already chatted through, and we're just feels like we're just getting started on the conversation, but we're already getting towards the end of the episode. Always like to wrap up each episode with one question. So we'll jump to that now. So the question I always like to ask is, within your industry, what is the biggest myth and why is it wrong?
Within my industry, what is the biggest myth and why is it wrong? It's that the biggest myth is that every signing service is the same. And that's far from being the truth. And it's far from being the truth because in this business, we believe in establishing relationships with our clients that will build into a partnership, right? And there are some signing services that do not want to, do not know how to, or don't think that it's necessary to have that relationship with the client. And then also the individuals that are working for the signing service, which are the notaries or the attorneys, right? So there are many companies that want to use technology to communicate with the client or the notary or the attorney. And there's where you kind of like lose the opportunity to develop a relationship with these individuals, because you're using technology to be your source, your primary mode of communication. And it just takes out the whole human element. And that's our strength. We want to have that human element with our clients and our notaries and our attorneys. We want to have voice-to-voice conversations. We want to have people responding back to us with their inquiries. And so because technology we're so dependent upon technology, Devin, in this business, because in order to fulfill the order request from a high volume client, we cannot make phone calls to notaries and say, listen, we have 500 orders, we can't make 500 phone calls, it's just not possible. So we use technology, and that's where I think the problem starts, that people get comfortable hitting a button, responding to what that button says, and think that that's okay. And there's so much room for self-interpretation because of that type of pattern of communication. That's where things can go wrong. So that's what's different about us.
No, I think that makes sense. A good myth to dispel, and a great one to better understand. So, well, now with that, now as we do wrap towards the end of the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Sure. Thanks for asking. Again, my name is Phillip Hogan. Name of the company is Signing Services of America. They can go to our website, signingservicesamerica.com, or they can go to our socials on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and they'll find me and also our company. And we would love to talk to anyone who wants to do business with us, learn more about us, or join us to help us continue to grow, become successful.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, support a great business, and if nothing else, make a new best friend. So with that, thank you again, Phillip, for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you, the listeners are out there, to help us to reach even more startups and small businesses, to help them along their journey to success, feel free to go and click subscribe, share, leave us a review, and really helps us to help more startups and small businesses along their journey to success. And on that note, if you ever need help along your journey with patents, trademarks, or anything else with your startup, your small business, feel free to reach out to us at Miller IP Law. Just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. Well, thank you again, Phillip, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Devin, thank you very much for having us. We really appreciate it. We wish you the best as well.